This video is brought to you by HalloCasa. Our tool transforms independent local real estate agents to global real estate agents. Create your own profile for free and get contacted by international investors. Sign up with the link in the description. Hello and welcome everyone to our 222nd session of HalloCasa. My name is Michael and today I'm talking to Stephen Husted from San Jose, California. Stephen is realtor at Rainmaker Real Estate, co-owner of Middle Coast Investment and an experienced real estate investor. Licensed since 2008, he combines deep local market knowledge with strong negotiation skills and creative client-first approach. Beyond working with buyers, sellers, and investors in California and out of state, Stephen is also a dedicated family man and a semi-professional mountain biker. Today, he'll share his journey, insights into real estate investing, and strategies for navigating today's market. Stephen, thank you so much for your time today. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you, Michael, for inviting me on. So my name is Stephen Husted, and I'm a real estate investor based out of San Jose, California. I've been in real estate since 2008, and I've seen a lot of ups and downs and different things going on. So I'm happy to share all my knowledge.
Since you started, give us a quick overview. Why did you move, and what was your first motivation in moving into real estate? What's your passion about?
So, yeah, this is a long story, but back in 2005, I had pretty much hit rock bottom and ended up in rehab. I got clean and came out and ended up going on a trip to Hawaii. And as I was walking through the airport, I saw a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I know this is kind of a story that a lot of people will say about their first starting point, but this is really how it started. And, at that point in my life, I was broke. I was going on a vacation with some friends and they were paying for things. And I read that book on the beach and I knew I had to build up. But that was 2005. So from that point, I ended up getting more intrigued. I went to a conference out in San Francisco. And back then, there wasn't any social media. I think they had like MySpace still. So there wasn't a lot of real estate content out there to kind of digest on your own. So what people would do is they would go to these conferences where these people would put them on. They would do a big pitch, whether it's like how to flip a house. And, when you got done with that conference, you would go out in the hall and you would buy like, audio, like CDs, that they would sell, and you'd go home and try to figure it out. And you really couldn't find a community to kind of learn through, except for these people. So I did, I went through that and continued to kind of go down that journey. And finally in 2008, my brother kind of pushed me into getting my real estate license. And it wasn't the first thing that resonated with me. I did, think it was interesting to get my license so that we could, buy distressed properties and flip properties. Like that part of it made sense to me. And so I went out and got my license. And at that same time, the minute I got my real estate license, the market crashed. The day that I got my license in the mail, I went to a kind of a mom and pop mortgage / real estate brokerage and was going to go hang my license up. And I remember that day very well, that, I'm walking in there thinking I've made it already, went out, bought some new clothes in the computer bag. And, I'm going to make a ton of money now because I'm getting my real estate license. And, I'm feeling like, I'm putting my best foot forward and going through life at that point, especially from where I had come in 2005. And I walked into this office, and I remember I could see all the way back to the broker's office. And there was two ladies in there. And all of a sudden I see papers flying up in the air. Those papers were, back then, they had loan reps that would go around to these mortgage offices and basically give you a sheet that told you, interest only, no doc loans, and blah, blah, all this information. Well, at that point, Bear Stearns had collapsed. And so basically these ladies were in there telling everybody to lock in their loans because that was going to be pretty much it. So that was kind of my starting point. And so I got in there, I hung my license, and the market crashed. And I started, I think I made 3,000 in my first year. I think I doubled it the second year, but then I got into short sales and REOs, and it was just a whole nother beast in itself. But it was a really tough market to start in, but it was also the best opportunity to start in as well because it was tough. And I think it's better to start in something that's really tough and you got to work through a lot of things, because if you can hold on during the bad times, when the good times come, you're well more positioned. And so that's what I did. I just hung on, and as the market started to get, stabilize and get better, and I got more skilled and built out a clientele, the business started to take off.
How did you sustain yourself with 3, respectively 6K during the first 2 years?
I had been a hairdresser for 35 plus years at that point. And when I got clean back in 2005, I had to start over from scratch in that industry as well. And so when I got clean, I went back to being a hairdresser. So I was basically a hairdresser and working in real estate at the same time. But and so that was keeping us afloat. But it was a really hard time back then because we had bought our house during the peak of the market and interest only, and I pretty much was starting over from scratch. So we went through a lot of turmoil. My girlfriend at the time then got pregnant. She moved in. We were having a baby. I had a lot on my plate. But the one thing that I knew I had to do was stay clean. I knew that if I stayed clean, I think things were going to work out. And I just was working and working and working. But here's the thing. The key to my whole real estate business and to where I am today is it's all from the salon. Because the salon, I had all my clients that worked in tech, because I live in San Jose, which is Silicon Valley. So everybody in there is working in tech. So all my clients were either buying and selling homes. It was a constant talking point. And here I have a relationship with a client, month after month, year after year, and they start to hear me go through my journey in real estate, and they trust me, which in real estate, trust is pretty much everything. I think that's the starting point, and then you have your skills below that really make you a full, complete realtor. And I started, helping buyers and sellers. But the interesting part of how it all really started was I had a client, he worked at Google, and he had a bunch of stock, and he wanted to buy a house out in Los Altos. And he said, "Hey, I'm looking at this house. I want to see if you could come over and check it out and give me some ideas on how to remodel it. I can't see it." So I went to the house, and I'm just like, "Hey, knock that wall out, do this, do this, do this." And he's like, I got the vision. He's like, "Okay, cool." And I said, "Do you have an agent?" And he's like, "Not yet." So I connected him with one of my clients who was an agent, and he bought the house. And she gave me like a $700 little finder's fee, which is, come to find out down the road, that's illegal to do, but she did. And I remember going, $700 is great. And about a year later, another gentleman, same thing, went to the house, talked about it. And we were sitting out front, and he just like looks at me and he goes, "You should get your real estate license." I'm like, he's like, "You should get your license." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "You sold me this house. Now you're connecting me to some lady that's one of your clients, and she's going to be the one." She's like, "Do you know how much a $2 million home in a commission check looks like?" I had no clue. So figured that out. And that's kind of the whole starting point to everything.
Fast forward, how would you describe the market right now in the Bay Area?
So The market has slowed down in general, and some of the markets are doing better than others, which is pretty common. And it depends on the product that you have. If you're selling a condo and townhouse, some areas are not doing as well, and the properties are sitting on the market for longer. But if you have a single family home and you do whatever it takes to get it ready for the market, you price it right, you market it correctly, they're typically selling. But overall, it has slowed down. But the thing is, with like San Jose and these areas, there's a lot of wealth, and people want homes. They want to get their kids into schools. They want locations, and so I think a little bit of a correction, a slowdown is pretty much normal, and that's really been predicated on just interest rates for the most part. The market's just been flying off the handle for so long that a little bit of a pause from buyers. I'll give you a good example. We had a house in San Jose, and it was going to be a flip. And back in January, there was a property that came on the market about a quarter mile away, very similar in bedrooms and square footage. It was a fixer-upper. The agent took iPhone photos, so it just kind of tells you what it looked like. And we then went on the market about 3 months later, and ours was fully remodeled, everything brand new, professional photos, you name it. And we got just a little bit above what they got. And it was just because of where the market was shifting at that time period. The buyers had slowed down, and the property couldn't move. And, that's just a little bit of a market timing, and sometimes it does happen. But overall, in general, Silicon Valley's market has always been doing really well.
Tell us a little bit right now about your company, the company you're working for. You are real estate agent, Rainmaker Real Estate. I must admit, I really like the approach, to be honest. But give us an overview there regarding the entire philosophy, because you are not that corporate, at least like in your value proposition, but also in your entire design, but also messaging.
Yes, obsessively human. The broker, the founder, Alex Wang, he owned a brokerage a while back, and I've been following him. He's up the peninsula in Los Altos, and he joined Serena Group in I believe Palo Alto at that time. And I was in Serena Group Los Gatos. And I thought one of the things that was very interesting about him is he was very tech focused. Like whatever was new and different, he was trying it, talking about it. And I was kind of doing the same thing down in Los Gatos. Like whatever was new that, was cutting edge or wanted to try out, I wanted to try out as well. And the funny part about it was a lot of the things that we were talking about just weren't accepted at that point. I could give an example of back in like 2012 when I started using Instagram. And I was telling agents in the office and the VP of Serena Group, I'm like, I'm going to post my open house of my property on Instagram. And I'm going to make the photo in black and white because it's an old vintagey 1930s bungalow. And then at the bottom, I'm going to put, it's open house. I'm going to give a little bit of information on it. And that's how I'm going to start to market. And they're just like, that's not going to work. Like, that's stupid. What I mean? And at that point, Instagram was mostly popular with like hairdressers, photographers, tattooers. It was more of an artistic space than it was like a business space, I would say. It was just a different platform. And I just remember going, no, this is going to work. And it's interesting because on my Instagram profile still, you scroll all the way down the bottom to 2012. There it is. There's that photo. So, we just shared a lot of different technology beliefs, and I really respected him. I think part of it mostly because he was forward thinking in a lot of ways and very successful. He had good aesthetics, with design, as you can tell from like Rainmaker's logos, and just everything is very clean. It's minimal. It makes a powerful impact, but it's not over the top. Everybody that's within the team, I would say, are just very client focused, good people. And he started Rainmaker 2.0 during COVID. And so a group of us from Serena Group ended up leaving and just going over to his office in Los Altos. So that's kind of where it all started. But a really good, really great group of people. I'm happy where I'm at.
Regarding the strategy then, the next years regarding Rainmaker, where do you think is the company heading? Where do you think is there any growth trajectory in the books? Do you plan to expand? Do you go into new services? What do you think is the next steps there?
I think it's more focused on the agents that are currently working at Rainmaker, and just making sure that, like I said, technology is a big talking point. And I think there's a lot of big shift coming in real estate right now. I think AI is it's going to be massive. I think it's going to be more massive than most people think. I think it's going to catch a lot of people off guard in a lot of ways. And so I haven't heard anything about any growth as far as opening up, other offices at this point, especially where the market is right now currently. And I think that the minute you start doing that too, you also sometimes lose focus on where you're currently at. And I think that what he's doing right now is working really well and keeping it at that point. But I have to admit, I'm kind of an outsider within Rainmaker. I mean, I know Alex really well, and we go to little events together, we grab meals together. But over the last, I would say 7 years, my focus has really shifted towards, being an investor, and developing has been kind of where I'm going direction wise. So I'm kind of really locked in on that at the moment.
Regarding the AI topic, let's talk. Let's say the entire value chain of a real estate agent. Where do you think is AI taking over the next? The other day I saw a tweet of a fully automated AI agent, AI real estate agent, making 40,000 in commission whatsoever within 24 hours.
What?
I don't know if
What?
that's true. I have no idea. Someone, these tweets when they say, yeah, I created this workflow and with voice and blah, blah. And maybe imagine you are generating like a lot of leads, and then you have a voice basically taking the calls and then qualifying for yourself. And then you have maybe one sale out of it and making the 40,000. That's what I assume. But where do you see from your stance, and also because you're so close with, the nucleus of technology in the Western world, what's your point of view there?
Well, that's an interesting. So let's say an AI agent. Let's kind of break that down a little bit. So let's say somebody went to Zillow. I don't know how the AI agent would take a buyer from point A to B that quick without some type of back end support. I don't even know if a buyer would actually trust that whole scenario, especially with money exchanging, escrow, what that looks like. However, I could see if you were a team and you had, you were on Zillow, and one of your team members was an AI agent and did a lot of the front end. Maybe it scheduled, the buyer's preview of the property, and it got them disclosures, and it took them through all the busy work that, let's say, a virtual assistant would do on the back end. I could see that working really well. We are building out an AI agent right now, and I'll give you an example. So you're a seller. I meet with you, and I get the listing, and we agree on price and terms. I want that uploaded into the system where the minute that I do that, the AI agent takes over from there, opens escrow, orders inspections, and just starts going through a chain of events and just does that. And what I see that doing for me in my business is, yes, that's something that an assistant, a transaction coordinator could be doing. But then what I can do is shift that coordinator, that VA, into other roles that are actually moving the needle a little bit more so. Like whether that's marketing or whatever aspect that I need that's a more high value thing, I just push them up to a different role. And I'm not quite there yet. I'm pretty much deep diving AI at this point. We're using it in all our other platforms. We have it, we're using it in Notion. We set up SOPs and we're doing all these things that we can. We're not quite there, but it is my biggest focus right now because I think it's going to change in so many different aspects. It's pretty incredible. And the tool itself I use ChatGPT and other, Grok, to do research on just like transactional questions and, like anything. I just put it in there and I get the information, which is interesting. I get the information, but then I get it so quick and it seems so accurate that I need to do some due diligence and fact check it as well. It's because the output is so quick. I'm going, okay, this looks great. Is this great? Let me do some research on this. You know what I mean? Like it's been crazy. We're definitely in the early stages of AI integration, I think, for businesses. And I think at this point, what's happening is we're just going to have to work through and get some proof of concept on how we're trying to do these workflows. That's the key. So I'm constantly now, like I just said about taking a listen agreement, like that is in my head visually. What I see happening now is just about getting that set up and fine tuning it, and then basically just doing some testing on it, and then moving on and seeing how I can integrate that into other. But I think it's going to go way deeper than this. I think AI is going to understand buyer behavior online, seller behaviors, and where that traffic comes from, and how do you gain those people that are out on the internet looking at properties are getting ready to sell, and they're Google searching and they're putting in there, what's the market like in San Jose or what's going on here? You know what I mean? Like that it's all going to get, I think, consolidated in a way that's going to be interesting. And sometimes I think with technology, you have these like breakout things that happen that people never knew that was going to come. You know what I mean? It's something that organically comes about. And I think that's something about AI that we're going to start to see, because it already is. You put different things into chat, you get these different answers, you got all these different things you can do. I mean, you could build out a full-on podcast development on, how to start a podcast, and it's going to, in less than 5 minutes, give you the blueprint. Now, years ago, how much research would you have to do? How many people would you have to hire to get you to that point? A lot. And now you could be up and running a podcast in less than a month if you follow some clear guidelines. So it's pretty wild. It's crazy.
You mentioned one element which I would like to go a bit deeper regarding clientele and also investments. But before that, I would like to ask you regarding first home buyer tips. You said, okay, there's so many questions to ask also when someone reaches out to you. From the point of view of someone who comes to you and says, listen, I don't know, I would like to buy, those ones when you were in your salon, first home buyers. What are tips which you, with all your experience now, give, or questions you ask where you think this is the most important thing to actually guide the real estate investor along the buying process?
Well, let's just say an end user buyer, I'll just use an example of a buyer that is maybe my client at the salon and they want to buy a house, I first want to understand, like, why do they want to buy? How long are they going to live? How long do they think they're going to live in that first property? Is this a temporary thing? Is it 7 to 10 years? That will dictate a lot. How they got pre-approved, purchase price, how they're going to do their down payment. And a lot of the questions because I think a lot of times I have buyers come to me, they just want to buy, but they really don't know why they want to buy. They just, because their friends bought, their family's telling them to buy. But does that really fit their financial blueprint at the time? Sometimes it doesn't. There's sometimes like, oh, I'm going to buy, but then I'm going to, we're thinking about moving to the Netherlands in 3 years. Well, you shouldn't buy a house. Just keep renting, because we don't know where the market would be 3 years from now. I mean, some markets that could have worked out really well. If you would have bought a house in 2018 and sold it in 2022, 2023, you would have done really well. But in general, you just really have to understand, why are you purchasing a home? And those questions are always ones that kind of flush out, some answers so that I can lead them down the right path. And then it goes into, their budget, into locations. And typically, their wants and needs has to get shrunk down, because whatever that wants and needs, it's usually something, it could be out of their budget. But then we just try to find how do we get them to, 80% of their wants list. And I think that at that point, there's no perfect house, but if you can get them a really good location and the house can be worked on over time, then I think you got a winner.
From an investment point of view, tell us what's your angle? You are within the state of California, but are also out of state. What's your investment philosophy there? Is it cash flow generating, going for appreciation, certain unit types? What's your approach there?
So this is a long roadmap as far as for me, for myself, on how I started investing, and also what my current clients and partners are doing as well. But it took me to 2015 to buy my first investment property. And I went into it with a business partner who happened to be a client of mine in the salon. And we bought a loft in downtown San Jose. And we paid $740 for it. And in 2022, we ended up selling it for 1.1. But during that period of time in 2015, I wanted to continue to invest, but Silicon Valley's market was really high, and to save up for a down payment, you would have to, just to get a property to cash flow or do whatever you need to do to anything on that aspect, you'd need at least $500,000 to even get going. And I was just getting impatient. And so one day I was just stumbling upon some investment videos on YouTube and found Bigger Pockets, and started watching their videos, started seeing about different markets throughout the United States, primarily in the Midwest. And that piqued my interest. Started learning about hard money and just all this different kinds of creative financing. And I just went down the rabbit hole. I then went to a Bigger Pockets conference and met a bunch of people, and just ended up at that point, bought my first investment property out in Detroit, Michigan. And then I bought my second in Kansas City. The first property was a small little 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 900 square feet in East Detroit, and not in the greatest neighborhood. I paid $34,000 for it. And it was a cute little house, hardwood floors, most of the big components were done. Got a tenant put in place, $900 a month. Everything was good there. The property in Kansas City was a complete fixer-upper, like down to the studs. Biggest, like, huge project to be taken on, being out of state. But I learned so much from those two properties. And so many things have gone wrong over the years, but what it's done is it's got me on my path to where I am today. And I think for for a new investor that's thinking about getting into this, you first and foremost want to figure out, what can you afford? How much money do you have to put down? And what market can you move into? Because I think sometimes people will say that, invest in your backyard. Well, maybe your backyard's too expensive. Where you live might be too pricey, but you want to invest. So you got to get going, where that makes sense. And you have to go through that learning curve. Because what I've learned, and it all kind of came organically, is I bought those properties, I took the risk, I got a lot of learning lessons, but at that same time, I started talking to friends and family, about what I was doing, clients at the salon, and, they were watching me scale and doing projects, and I'm just talking. And then what that did was that led to primarily clients of mine that work in tech that have money that were like, hey, look, I'm working a 9 to 5. I'd love to invest too. Can we do a partnership? Like, what would that look like? And so those things started happening as well. And then what it ended up being was I ended up taking on the role of the day-to-day, the operations, the visionary. And, back to your question about, what are we looking for? Cash flow, appreciation. It's very subjective to an investor. And it really does come down to like, how much money do you have to invest? Because if you got, if you're only got 30 to 50,000 to invest, you're limited to maybe the Midwest. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you can get into the Midwest, you can find distressed properties, you could use hard money, you can get all the construction money from the lender, you can hire a team on the ground. There's social media, YouTube, there's all these ways now, ChatGPT. I mean, you can figure it out and you can start there. And the investing scenario is it's not a get rich scheme. It's a long-term play, and you can lose money. It's very easy to lose money. Then you make money. And if any investors that have been investing for 10 plus years have lost money, and if they haven't, and if they don't say that, they're lying, because there's just a lot of different moving parts, and markets do things that are out of the control of the investor. But we built out a portfolio of properties out in Kansas City. We have Detroit, we have Tennessee, we have these different markets, but recently we've moved into Seattle, and Seattle's a whole different type of play. It's primarily development, where we're buying a single family home that's on a corner lot, or has an alley that has a basement, and we're building up the basement, rehabbing the main house. So now we got 2 units, but in that same time period, we're also in planning to build in the backyard. And in Seattle, they're very pro housing. They want density. They don't have a lot of land. Seattle's surrounded by water for the most part. There's just not a lot of open land. And so they're trying to solve their housing crisis. And this is the way they're doing it. So you're basically building ADUs. They call them DADUs. And they have a new product called middle housing, which can go from 1,000 square feet to 1,400 square feet to 1,900 square feet, in that range. But they want density. And so on top of that, you could go into a lot that's say 5,000, 6,000 square feet and the lot size, and you can build 2 to 3 units, but you also can condoize them and sell them off individually. So you grab the main house, you rehab the main house, either you put tenants in place or you sell that off completely. Most of the time you're breaking even on that main house, because the minute that you lot split, you're devaluing the main house by about 10%. But at that point, you just gained this backyard, the land, quote unquote, for free. So now you can go and get a loan, and you can basically get a loan for $400,000, a construction loan, and build up this new unit. That $400,000, you can turn around and sell that unit for anywhere between $7 to $1 million, depending on the location. And this type of strategy has a lot of different exits as well, which I kind of what I really like about it is, if the market shifts, and let's say I couldn't sell one of those units, if I'm keeping the construction costs around 400,000, maybe a little bit more, I can just turn around and refinance it and basically put a tenant in place and hold it for the time being. So I have a lot of different things that I can do with this strategy. And once I was on the ground, I flew out there. And interesting enough, how I even got into Seattle was I went to another Bigger Pockets conference down the road. And, you just meet people at conferences, had my podcast, and I brought these people on, and I'm hearing them tell me within an hour of talking on the podcast what they were doing. So I'm learning from them, one guest after another, just over and over. And finally I was like, this is kind of interesting. And I knew at that point, California was going down the same path. So I just jumped on a plane and flew out there and got on the ground and really liked Seattle. Seattle reminds me a lot like San Jose and Silicon Valley in California, minus their point where their weather is bad, but it has, a lot of tech growth, nice neighborhoods, solid employment, it's got all the good things there. So that's kind of what we've been doing. And I'm just been hyper focused on that. And, back to like the investing journey, it really started a modest, it started off with a nice property in San Jose, but then it led to the Midwest to, a cheap $30,000 house that I learned all this, the good and the bad. Then over to Kansas City and started, doing flips and projects and keeping these houses as like, long-term rentals. But it was such a long journey to this point, and a lot of mistakes. We have short-term rentals, we have midterm rentals. And to be quite honest, I really don't want those anymore. I've been doing short-term and midterm rentals since 2015, and there's nothing wrong with them. It's just that I like to, if I'm going to focus on a strategy, I want to stay right in that lane and just deep dive it. And I feel like when you take on too many different real estate strategies, because it's really easy to get online these days and you hear people talking about all the different things that they're doing that you just don't know what direction, or you're just chasing shiny objects. I've learned that too. So currently that's all we're doing. We're in Seattle, we're developing, we've took on a lot of big projects, but it's been a really cool learning lesson. And I like the fact that once it's all said and done, you've built something, it's going to be there, to test the time, and it's going to have somebody living in it that's going to like it for whatever reason. It's a good feeling all across the board.
How many units do you have now at the moment?
In Seattle?
Overall, like your entire portfolio, do you still hold things
I
in Kansas or?
think we own about 21 doors in Kansas City. We have a property out in Smoky Mountains. I have one property left in Michigan, only one, the one that I just told you about, the first starting point. I sold that one finally. that one was a crazy one. Seattle, we've purchased 5 houses so far in a year and a half, and we have 11 houses in development.
The first property in San Jose, let's say personal relationship with your partner is out of scope financially. Why don't you just say, okay, I keep it, it's running well. You might have, I don't know if in the US, you don't need to pay taxes when you sell, or more taxes within the first 10 years. In Germany, it's the case. And you just, I don't know, get a new mortgage, refinance it with better terms, but you decided against it, which has financially one implication of maybe just transaction costs, broker costs, and then for another property again. So just understanding that a financial thought process, what motivated you there to get rid of it and to maybe use the proceeds for something bigger. Was that the purpose?
Yes. So the property this loft was in a part of San Jose by Diridon Station, which was right by the right off the Alameda, and it was in this section where Google had just bought all this land. And prior to COVID, they had bought all this land, and the pricing, literally where this loft was at, you would basically see Google's new campus. And so the prices flew off the handle. However, when COVID happened, there was chatter that Google was going to be backing out of this build out at the moment, and we'd hit the peak, and we thought, well, we wanted to take on a bigger house, and we wanted to get into a different price point, different market altogether. So what we did is we did a 1031 exchange, and we bought a property out in the Smoky Mountains. So, and with as far as like closing costs and all that, since I'm an agent, I listed it myself. So obviously we saved money there. And we took that proceeds and put it into the property out in the Smoky Mountains. And we bought that property for 1.1. But this is kind of the real talk of investing. When I go back to saying that, you make money, you lose money. So we made pretty good money off that small little loft, buying it in 2015 and then selling it. We bought this cabin, and there was 3 cabins on this one street, and this old man, he owned it. He owned all 3 of them. And he was basically a tired landlord, but he had them on Verbo, and they look like just old cabins, run down furniture, not really good photos. And he priced all the cabins relatively the same. Like, so if you went onto ours back then, it was $300 a night, every night. There was he didn't use any software to understand where the peak times were during, Christmas and Thanksgiving and the holidays. It was just 300 a night, booked the whole time. So we look at the property, we start running the numbers, and during COVID, a lot of people are traveling. And, the pricing for Airbnbs was much higher then. And it was one of the biggest points that I was trying to get information on through my agent was, I don't really care what the market was during COVID, but how was this market in 2017, 18? I did enough research on the Smoky Mountains. I understood that it was a big travel destination. So I don't have any problem there. But really, what were the actual numbers of these properties generating pre-COVID? So kind of got that data, but we ended up buying and closing on this property, and we added new furniture. We took professional photos. We added a hot tub. He didn't have a hot tub. Hot tubs are a really big amenity in the Smokies, and it gets you more bookings and pricing and all that. We did all the things you could possibly do. And then once that market started to shift, which the Airbnb market has shifted throughout the United States right now, we've ended up getting the same pricing he did when he ran it like it was bad furniture in the photos. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, we did all this work, but and ran our numbers rather well, and we had a good couple years until the market started to shift. And we're doing decent. However, I don't want to go into an investment that's basically there's no appreciation happening. All we're really getting from running this property is principal pay down for the most part and some tax benefits. So those are good for a real estate investor. Like, you're okay with that. However, I know that if I just sell that property off, I could just take that proceeds and go to Seattle and triple it in a year. I understand that clearly, and that's what we want to do. But we put the cabin on the market about a year ago, probably about a year ago, I would say. And since the rates are so high, these properties just are not penciling out for an investor. They're not hitting the numbers that make sense. And so property sat, we just ended up pulling it off the market, and we're just going to hold on. We're just going to hold the property and keep it running. And, it does really well. I wish it was closer, honestly, so that I could visit it more, because it's absolutely a beautiful location. But San Jose, where we live in Silicon Valley, we typically go places like Tahoe. It's 4 hour drive, which Smokies is a pretty long flight, but it is a gorgeous, gorgeous location.
On all your listings and the others, the doors, you have more, you always finance those ones, or how is there the best debt to equity ratio for you, which makes the most sense? Do you go as much mortgage as possible, or what's there your rule of thumb?
No, we try not to be super over leveraged, but we're doing 30 to 40% with down payments, sometimes more. It just really depends on the property and the project and what we're trying to do and how we're exiting with them. I think some of the properties out in Kansas City, we pretty much bird out of most of them and, got our initial down payments out and bought more. That market has shifted a little bit as well as far as the rents are concerned. We just had a couple properties, three, I think, that went vacant, and the rents that we had on those prior to them going vacant, we're not getting those numbers right now. So that's something that we're tracking that as well. But yeah, we tried. I would say we're cautious investors. The most part, I think a lot of that is contributed to the timing that I got into real estate. I think getting into real estate during 2008, a lot of people were buying investment properties and they're buying two, three, four, five, and they're doing interest. Like there was all this chaos, and I witnessed it firsthand. And so I think that made me a little bit more cautious on how it's been a slow burn up, which is okay. I think there's nothing wrong with that.
And you like the hands-on approach. I assume that the 35K one in on the East Coast or in Detroit was not a pleasant journey, correct? It was a lot of work
No.
potentially. And it was maybe also tenants you are happy not to see again anymore. I don't know. Like, you have these experiences. Now the question is, would you describe yourself like having the DNA to like the hands-on and the operation, and that's why you go for it? Or do you say, no, it's also financially, I'm getting more money out of it, instead of versus putting the money into a REIT or a trust and being basically like one of your limited partners investing along you and just going for a 9 to 5 job, is that like more passion driven, or do you say, no, it makes more sense also to self-administer and to be manually involved and not to automate it and just say, here's my money and all good. And and that since you're following bigger pockets from 8 to 12%, you have different investment vehicles, different investment options, which have a different value proposition. What is the driver that you say, no, I like to have to be in the operations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like the creative aspect of investing. I love taking distressed properties and rehabbing them and bringing them back to life. Like I think that's like first and foremost the biggest part of it all. The money part of it, of course, it's good to make money, and there's a lot of benefits to investing. I'm a real estate professional, so I get a lot of tax benefits from owning investment properties. Whenever I take a loss on the property, that really actually helps me out. So whatever I make as far as gross income, it condenses that down and deducts from it. So I really enjoy that part of it. But at the end of the day, I'm a creative person, and I love the construction part, and I always have. And so, and it could be, when I brought up about the cabin out in the Smokies, I had to go pick out the furniture. I had to do the photos. That's all creative stuff. So I enjoy that part of it. When it comes to like what do we have to do with the plumbing, or this is going on here? My business partner's handling that part. I'm the one that's just doing the more creative aspects of things. And Seattle's the same way. We're have to figure out what type of property we're building, how many bedrooms, bathrooms, what kind of tile, what kind of style we're doing. These are the things that that really get me excited, first and foremost. And they're always different. These projects, everything is different. And so it's not the same thing over and over, day to day. And so investing into a REIT, everybody has a direction, and it really just comes down to the individual on really what kind of time they want to put into it. I think a lot of people follow other investors online, and they get a skewed version of really what goes on and how much time it takes. And we have a full team. We have several VAs. We have people working 5 days a week on different aspects of the business. And even with that, I am super busy. I could even step away from the business right now if I needed to. And do I want to have that at some point? Sure, I do. But at this point, it's hands-on. And that's okay, because I think if you're a creative person or a visionary, you do want to be hands-on. You want to kind of man the ship into the direction that you're going. The whole Seattle scenario, when I went out there, I came back to some of the partners and said, this is what I want to do. I pitched them. I painted the vision. I gave them data. They did their own research, and then we pulled the trigger. And I'm going to do this until I feel like it's, ran its course and it's changed. But I feel like development and construction is where it's always going to be. But, interesting about construction and development and creativity and all these things. One of my favorite classes in middle school was drafting. I had two classes that were my favorite in middle school. It was drafting and TV journalism. Okay, this was in middle school. And it's so interesting that I'm 56 years old and I've gone all through this time. And now these two classes that were my favorite classes in middle school are two of the things that I actually do now. And the drafting class, I had a gentleman who lives in Seattle who was one of my classmates reach out to me on Facebook, and he DM'd me and he said, hey, it looks like you took that drafting class serious. He's like, because now you're building houses. And I'm like, I go, what? What do you remember? He's like, well, you built a house and I helped you with your foundation. And you were questioning the teacher on the style of the house. Like you wanted to go in a whole different direction than what they were like, everybody had to build. And he's like, so it's interesting to watch you now, decades later, you're building houses, like you're doing that. Or it's the same with TV journalism was a class where we had to do commercials and like news things and write scripts and use cameras. And now the media is here. So I think in general, just real estate investing, all these different things it's a long journey, and it's not something that just happens overnight. There's lots of different ups and downs and pivots and learning lessons. But I think that it also translates. I think a lot of this translates into other aspects of your life as well. I think investing is just one part of it, but I think investing is, like I'm an endurance athlete. I take my endurance athlete, like what I go through there, and I use that in investing, because it's a long-term play. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of parallels to the two. You know what I mean? So it all is all one big thing. And yeah, it's a really cool thing to be in.
Stephen, I know your time is limited. I know also we could talk for a couple of more hours. I would have definitely more questions, but I want to close it with this. I really learned a lot. Thank you so much for your very interesting journey and how everything especially started, that you took a certain leap of faith at a certain time, also being pushed into real estate by friends and family, basically. And now not only am a very successful real estate agent, but have become a really successful real estate investor across the nation. I really learned a lot regarding the market right now that you mentioned. It's quite stable. It's quite slow at the moment, which is normal. It's one of those elements which, after having been for decades in this market, in this industry, you know that those times are also part of it. And you gave us a very nice intro regarding maybe also tips for first home buyers, what for questions to ask yourself, what to look out for, and then going into a couple of operational elements regarding AI, regarding best practices there, and the vision of your brokerage, the nice approach regarding the design, and also the very strong tech aspect. Finally, you gave us a very thorough idea of your investment approach and your thesis, and how you started in San Jose and then going to Detroit, and then from there to Kansas, and then from there again a little bit to the east, Seattle, and now having like your entire empire with all your operations running. Thank you so much for the insights. Is there anything else you would like to mention with the audience which we haven't touched upon?
I would say just be curious in your life, and explore different things, whether it's business related or things that can better you as a human, and how you can work on yourself internally. I think that we have a lot of technology has come a long way, and we can do a lot of cool things with it. And I think that just exploring and being curious is such a beneficial, and I think that it gets you fulfillment. It definitely has for me.
Good. I like that. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, you could find me on Instagram at Stephen Husted. And I also have a podcast called the Breakthrough Podcast. And that's pretty straightforward to find me there. And that's kind of where I'm active.
Perfect. I'll put those into the show notes so that people can directly reach out to you. Stephen, thank you so much. Sending the best regards and a big hug to San Jose. And yeah, we talk soon.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This video is brought to you by HalloCasa. Our tool transforms independent local real estate agents to global real estate agents. Create your own profile for free and get contacted by international investors. Sign up with the link in the description.